Have you ever worked so hard for something, only to feel strangely quiet inside when you finally got it? Maybe you spent years believing that once life became stable, the heaviness would disappear. Maybe you told yourself that once the money came in, once the bills were easier, once the chaos of survival stopped, something inside you would finally relax. Maybe you thought success would feel like relief, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you reach the life you prayed for, and instead of joy, there is only a strange distance between you and the person living it. Maybe you still wake up tired, even though your life is no longer difficult in the way it used to be. Maybe you sit in a nice apartment, holding a cup of good coffee, and wonder why something still feels unfinished inside your chest. Or maybe you've had the quiet, uncomfortable thought that you would never say out loud. What if this isn't the life I actually wanted? Just the life I thought would fix everything. If any of that sounds familiar, this story is for you. And if you stay with me until the end, you might begin to see something in your own life a little more clearly. In Turin, Italy, a city of long boulevards, old stone buildings, and cafes where people sit for hours watching life pass slowly, there lived a man named Matteo Rinaldi. Matteo was 33 years old. From the outside, his life looked exactly like the kind of story people admire. He had a stable job as an operations manager for a logistics company on the northern side of the city, near the industrial districts where trucks came and went all day. His salary was good, not spectacular, but good enough. He lived in a clean one-bedroom apartment with tall windows that looked down onto a quiet street where scooters buzzed past every morning. He had a proper coffee machine, a decent wardrobe, a girlfriend named Elisa who had been with him for almost 6 years, and most importantly, Matteo had something his younger self had once believed was the ultimate victory. He was no longer poor. That sentence had shaped almost everything about his life, because Matteo had grown up in a very different version of Turin. Not the cafe-lined squares or the elegant buildings. Tourists photographed. He grew up in a cramped apartment near the outskirts of the city where the walls were thin and the elevators rarely worked. His mother worked long shifts in a small grocery store. His father drove delivery vans and believed in exactly 2 values: work harder and complain less. Money conversations were always tense, sometimes quiet, sometimes sharp. Matteo remembered the sound of coins being counted on the kitchen table, the slow, careful way his mother would organize bills into small piles: electricity, rent, food, maybe something left over, maybe not. When he was younger, Matteo made a quiet promise to himself. One day he would live a life where nobody had to count coins before buying groceries. One day life would be easier, cleaner, safer. So he did what people do when they grow up with that kind of promise. He worked, he studied when others slept, he accepted jobs nobody wanted. He learned to be dependable, useful, reliable. By his mid-20s, he had already built the reputation that would follow him into his 30s. Matteo was the man who could handle pressure, the man who stayed calm, the man who solved problems without drama. His bosses liked him, his co-workers respected him. And slowly, piece by piece, the life he had imagined began to form around him. Better pay, better apartment, better clothes, better restaurants. The kind of life that looked stable. From the outside, Matteo had succeeded. But somewhere along the way, something inside him had become strangely quiet. Not broken, not dramatic, just muted. It began with small things, mornings that felt heavier than they should. Conversations where he noticed himself speaking automatically, like someone following a script he had memorized years ago. He still did everything correctly. He went to work, he paid his bills, he met Elisa for dinner, he answered messages, he laughed at the right moments. But there was a growing sense that he was watching his own life from slightly outside of it, like an actor who had forgotten why the character mattered. Elisa noticed it before anyone else did. One evening they were sitting in a small restaurant near Via Garibaldi, the long pedestrian street that cut through the center of Turin. The place smelled like roasted garlic and fresh bread. Outside, the city lights were warm and soft. Elisa was talking about something at her job, a new project, a co-worker who had made a mistake, the usual small things couples share with each other after long days. Matteo nodded. He listened. He even smiled. But halfway through her sentence, Elisa stopped talking. She looked at him for a moment, not angry, just curious. "Where did you go?" she asked. "I'm here." She tilted her head slightly. "You disappeared for a second." He laughed softly, the way people do when they want to move past something quickly. "I'm just tired." Elisa didn't argue, but she studied his face for a moment longer before continuing the conversation. Moments like that began happening more often. Matteo started noticing something strange. Even when his life was comfortable, even when nothing was wrong, there was a quiet voice inside him asking a question he didn't want to hear. It came in the mornings while he stood in the shower. It came during his commute while traffic crawled along the ring roads of the city. It came late at night when the apartment was silent and the lights from the street outside painted slow shadows across the walls. The question was simple. But Matteo avoided answering it because the truth behind it felt dangerous. The question was this: if this is the life I worked so hard to build, why does it feel like I don't belong inside it? The strange thing about quiet dissatisfaction is that it rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't arrive like disaster. It doesn't break the door down. Instead, it slips into life slowly, almost politely. At first, Matteo thought he was just tired. That seemed reasonable. His job demanded long hours. Logistics companies never really slept. Trucks arrived at strange times. Shipments were delayed. Problems needed solving before sunrise. So he did what he had always done whenever life felt uncomfortable. He tried to optimize it. He started waking up earlier. He told himself discipline would fix the heaviness. Morning runs, cold showers, better food, productivity podcasts during his commute. For a while, it almost worked. Or at least it looked like it worked. His schedule became sharper. His calendar more organized. His performance at work even improved. His boss praised him during a meeting one Friday afternoon. "Matteo, you're one of the most reliable people we have here." Everyone nodded. Matteo nodded too. But inside, something felt oddly disconnected. The praise didn't land anywhere. It passed through him like wind through an open window. At home, Elisa began noticing the distance more clearly. Not because Matteo was cruel, not because he had changed dramatically, but because he had become thin, emotionally thin. Conversations that used to stretch into late nights now ended early. His answers became shorter, safer, more practical. One evening, Elisa was cooking pasta in the small kitchen of Matteo's apartment. The windows were open, letting in the warm evening air from the street below. Matteo sat at the table scrolling through his phone. Elisa stirred the pot slowly and said something that should have been a normal question. "Do you remember when you used to talk about starting your own company?" Matteo looked up. "What company?" "You know, the small delivery idea you had. You used to sketch plans in those notebooks." Matteo frowned slightly. "That was years ago." "Yes," Elisa said quietly. "But you used to light up when you talked about it." Matteo shrugged. "That was before I understood how things actually work." Elisa placed 2 plates on the table. She sat down across from him, and then she said something that stayed with him long after the conversation ended. "You've become very good at surviving," she said. Matteo looked confused. "I'm not surviving. I'm doing well." Elisa nodded slowly. "That's what worries me." He laughed awkwardly. "What does that even mean?" She held his eyes for a moment. "You used to look like someone building a life," she said. Now her voice softened slightly. "Now you look like someone managing one." Matteo didn't know how to respond, so he did what people often do when a conversation gets too close to something uncomfortable. He changed the subject, but Elisa's words stayed with him. Not loudly, just somewhere in the background, like a sentence written faintly on the inside of his mind. Over the next few weeks, Matteo began noticing how mechanical his days had become. Wake up, shower, coffee, commute, work, emails, meetings, traffic, dinner, sleep, repeat. Nothing was wrong, but nothing felt alive either. Then came the moment that cracked something open. It happened on a quiet Thursday night. Matteo arrived home later than usual. The apartment was dark. Elisa wasn't there. At first, he assumed she had stayed late at work, but when he walked into the bedroom, he noticed something unusual. Her overnight bag was gone. There was a small note on the kitchen table. Not angry, not dramatic, just simple handwriting. "Matteo, I think we both know something has been missing for a while. You're physically here, but something inside you has disappeared. I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days. Not to punish you, just to breathe. Elisa." Matteo stood there holding the note. The apartment felt larger than usual, too quiet. He walked to the window and looked out at the dim street below. For the first time in a long while, the silence around him felt uncomfortable. Not peaceful, not restful, just empty. That night he barely slept. The next morning he left early for work. On the way, he stopped near Porta Palazzo Market, one of the busiest areas in Turin. Stalls were opening, vendors arranging fruit, people moving through the narrow streets, carrying bags of vegetables and bread. Matteo wasn't hungry, but he kept walking until he stopped outside a small repair shop he had passed hundreds of times without noticing. Inside, An older man sat at a wooden work table surrounded by coats, bags, and worn jackets waiting to be repaired. The man looked up when Matteo stepped inside. "Morning," the old man said. Matteo nodded. "Morning." The man's eyes moved briefly to Matteo's coat. A well-made dark wool coat. Professional, clean. But there was a small tear near the inside seam. The old man pointed gently. "You know your lining is splitting." Matteo looked down. "I didn't notice." The old man smiled slightly. "That's the thing about linings," he said. "From the outside, everything still looks perfect." He gestured toward the work table. "Take it off." Matteo hesitated, then removed the coat and handed it over. The old man turned it inside out and spread it across the table. The inner stitching had started coming apart, not dramatically, but enough that the fabric was slowly separating. "You see," the old man said calmly, "nothing wrong with the outside." He tapped the inner seam gently. "But this part is under tension all day." Matteo watched quietly. The old man threaded a needle. "Most people only repair what others can see," he continued. "But the inside, that's where things actually break." He began stitching slowly. The room was quiet, except for the soft sound of thread pulling through fabric. After a few minutes, the man glanced up at Matteo. "You look like someone whose lining might also be splitting." Matteo blinked. "What?" The old man shrugged. "I've been fixing things for 40 years. He tied a knot in the thread. Coats, bags, shoes. Then he smiled faintly. And sometimes people, Matteo didn't know why, but he stayed. The old man finished the repair and handed the coat back. "Good as new?" Matteo asked. The man shook his head gently. "No." He tapped the inner seam again. "Just honest again." Then he leaned back in his chair. "If you want to try something interesting," he said, "spend the next 30 days fixing things in your life that nobody else can see." Matteo frowned. "What does that mean?" The old man smiled slightly. "You'll know." Then he added one final sentence before returning to his work. "Most people build their lives like coats for display." Pause. "But the life you actually live is always on the inside." Matteo walked out of the repair shop with his coat folded over his arm. The air in Turin was cool that morning. Vendors were shouting prices across the market square. Scooters buzzed past the narrow streets. Somewhere nearby, a cafe machine hissed as milk steamed for the first customers of the day. Life was moving normally. But something in Matteo's mind had slowed down. He kept hearing the old man's sentence again. Most people build their lives like coats for display. He slipped the coat back on. For the first time since Elisa left the note on the table, Matteo didn't rush straight to work. Instead, he sat at a small cafe across from the market. The place was simple. Metal chairs, small round tables, the smell of fresh espresso and warm bread. He ordered coffee and stared at the surface of the table for a long time. 30 days. Fix things nobody can see. It sounded vague, but it also sounded strangely precise. For years, Matteo had been improving the visible parts of his life. Better apartment, better clothes, better job title, better routines. But when he tried to think about the last time he had repaired something inside himself, his mind went quiet. So he began, not dramatically, just honestly. Day one, Matteo wrote a sentence in a notebook, not a productivity plan, not a life strategy, just a sentence. I don't feel proud of the person I've become. The words felt uncomfortable, but also strangely relieving. For the first time in a long while, he had said something true. Day 5, Matteo noticed something during a meeting at work. Normally, he spoke like someone trying to prove he deserved to be there. Sharp answers, quick solutions, competent. But that day, he simply listened, really listened, and for the first time he realized how much of his life had been driven by one quiet fear, never being poor again. Everything he had built came from that promise. But somewhere along the way, he had confused security with identity. Week 2, he called Elisa. Not to argue. Not to convince her to come home, just to talk. When she answered, there was a long pause before either of them spoke. I've been thinking, Matteo said slowly. Elisa didn't interrupt. I think I built my life like armor, he continued. Pause. And then I forgot how to take it off. On the other end of the phone, Elisa exhaled softly. That sounds like the Matteo I remember, she said. Not the confident one, the honest one. Month 1, small changes started appearing. Not dramatic ones, but real ones. Matteo began walking through the city in the evenings without headphones. He visited parts of Turin he hadn't seen in years. Old streets near the river, quiet parks, small bookstores he used to love when he was younger. He started playing guitar again, something he had abandoned because it didn't feel useful. One night he even laughed alone in his apartment after remembering a ridiculous moment from years ago. It surprised him because the laugh sounded real. Month 3, Matteo returned to the repair shop near Porta Palazzo. The old man, Signor Beppe, was sitting in the same chair, surrounded by jackets and bags waiting to be repaired. You look different, Beppe said before Matteo even spoke. Matteo smiled slightly. I think my lining stopped tearing. Beppe chuckled. That's good. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Matteo said something he hadn't planned to say. I turned down a promotion last week. Beppe raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. I realized I was chasing titles to prove something that already happened. And what was that? Beppe asked. Matteo shrugged. That I escaped the life I grew up in. Beppe leaned back in his chair. And now? Matteo looked out toward the busy street outside. Now I'm trying to actually live the one I have. Beppe smiled quietly. That's a much harder job. Elisa eventually came back, not because Matteo promised to become perfect, but because he stopped pretending to be someone else. Their conversations became slower, more honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but real, and Matteo noticed something strange. For the first time in years, his life didn't feel like a performance. It felt like something he was actually inside, not watching from the outside, living. My friend, this story isn't just about Matteo, it's about something many people experience but rarely admit. Sometimes the life you worked hardest to build is the one that quietly disconnects you from yourself. And when that happens, the solution is rarely bigger success. It's honesty. 3 simple lessons from Matteo's story. First, a life can look perfect from the outside and still be quietly falling apart inside. Second, security solves survival problems, but it cannot solve identity problems. Third, real change often begins when you start repairing the parts of your life that nobody else can see. So here's a small challenge for you today. Ask yourself one honest question. What part of my life looks good from the outside, but feels wrong on the inside? Don't answer it quickly. Sit with it. Write it down if you need to, because sometimes the most powerful changes in life begin with one quiet moment of truth. If this story made you think about your own life, I want you to do something simple. Leave one word in the comments. Just one word that describes how you've been feeling lately. No explanations needed. You might be surprised how many people recognize that same word. And if you know someone who has worked hard for their life but still feels strangely lost inside it, share this story with them. Sometimes people don't need advice. They just need to know they're not the only one asking these questions. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if you'd like more stories like this, stories about ordinary people finding quiet clarity in complicated lives, you're always welcome here, because sometimes the stories that change us the most are the ones that feel a little too familiar.